good evening. My name is Luke Blackwell, and I am with the Temple of Ascending Flame. We are practitioners of the Draconian current, and today I have a presentation on the Holy Grail. This will be a historical and esoteric analysis. Kind of as a preamble, and I give this preamble when it comes to any kind of symbolic religious imagery analysis. Two contradictory meanings can be true at once. Meaning is often contextualized. So for example, the pentacle, which you can see at the bottom left of this presentation. The pentacle can mean two different things, depending on the context, right? So in the apocryphal book, the Testament of Solomon, the Archangel Michael gives King Solomon this pentacle as a symbol to command demons. However, in Wicca, the pentacle is a symbol of paganism. It's a symbol of the five elements, and it's a symbol of magical practice. So both interpretations are equally valid, but the same symbol means different things in different contexts. And I think that's important to understand in analysis. So keep that in mind. We'll start with the pre-Christian use of the Grail. Now, there's many different angles in which one could talk about the Grail, which is a motif in Christian mythology of the chalice that Jesus drank from during the Last Supper. One can do an analysis from a more Hindu perspective and the idea of divine drink or soma. One can look at it from a Native American perspective with ritualistic drug use. One can look at it even from the perspective of kind of like Germanic chivalric ideas. However, the focus of this presentation, when it comes to pre-Christian use of the Grail, is going to be focused in on Greco-Roman mythology. Not only is that important for the evolution of Christianity, just from that context in its relationship, but it's also relevant for our current. Our interpretation of the current here at the Temple of Ascending Flame, we do tend to have a bigger focus on Greco-Roman mythology, Greco-Egyptian mythology, as well as biblical mythology. So analyzing Greco-Roman mythological roots and sources of the Grail imagery is very important from that perspective. I will also add that the Grail, as I'm describing it, I mean, when I talk about pre-Christian use of the Grail, I'm referring more to a lot of its basic elements and ideas that you see in the Christian mythological story. To begin with, we need to talk about Orphism. Now, Orphism was a Dionysian sect allegedly founded by Orpheus. I will get into Dionysus in a later slide. Orpheus, he was a poet, a philosopher, and musician. He was devoted to Dionysus. He's famous for his story of descending into the underworld, right? So King Hades, who's the king of the underworld, steals Orpheus's lover, Eurydice, and he has to descend into the underworld to retrieve her. And the one catch is he cannot look back at her, because if he does, she'll be lost forever. And he's walking away with her, not looking at her. He hears her voice, he looks back at her, and she's lost forever. The Orphics were interesting because they had a different mythology than the normal Greco-Roman mythology. It was slightly modified. They have a unique idea of where humanity came from and where Dionysus came from that wasn't present in the ordinary, typical Greco-Roman mythology. The Orphics believed that at one day, Zeus turned into a serpent and made love to Queen Persephone, the queen of the underworld. She gave birth to this dark prince deity, Zagreus, who's going to be the heir to the throne of the underworld. However, Zeus was married to Hera, who is his wife and the queen of the gods. She was enraged, and she sends the Titans to rip Zagreus apart, which they did. Zeus fights back and strikes down with his lightning bolt, but too late. These animalistic, evil Titans, they devoured Zagreus, and Zagreus is no more. However, Zeus managed to grab Zagreus' heart and preserve it. He gave it to Athena, and he placed it in the womb of a human priestess named Semele, who I believe was a virgin. From Semele's womb came Dionysus. Zagreus is reborn as Dionysus, who is half human and half god. The Orphics also had a unique anthropology in that this story is where humanity came from. They believed that humanity were these animalistic, chthonic, titan-fleshy characters and creatures. And in the lingering flesh of the Titans after Zeus slaughtered them with a lightning bolt, Zagreus' divinity penetrated that fleshy matter and gave rise to us. And we have that divine spark of Zagreus or Dionysus within us. So the Orphics believed that we could connect to Dionysus through our own internal divinity, through that internal divine spark, and be connected with the gods through it. The Orphics ritualistically used the drink mead in their ceremonies, and they used it as a divine drink as a symbol of Dionysus to connect themselves with that inner divinity. So it was this ritualistic use of this alcoholic mead honey wine drink. It was a symbol of connecting to the divine through one's own internal divinity. And by using that internal spark and using this kind of ritualistic mead, one could obtain salvation with the gods. However, the Orphics were pretty unique in that they were an ascetic philosophical cult. The Dionysian cult existed in other forms, in ritual celebrations, which were far less ascetic, far less detached, far less monastic. Dionysus, if you don't know, he is the Greek god of wine. He's the Greek god of agriculture. He's the Greek god of fertility and madness and insanity. And in these more ordinary Dionysian rituals, wine was frequently used as a divine drink to experience Dionysus' divinity through drunkenness, through ritual drunkenness, group drunkenness, to experience group frenzy. And this ritual was called the orgia. It's actually where we get the word orgy from. Now, orgy at first didn't actually mean, group sex activity. It actually kind of meant this divine ritual to experience drunkenness and madness and the divinity of Dionysus, to be possessed by Dionysus. However, that changed when these rituals would often devolve into group sexual activity. And that often became a staple of the rites. We have Livy, who's this Roman historian writing about the Bacchanalia in Italy, and he describes that that's what happened. They would do this Dionysian ritual, and they would all have group sex with each other. He saw it as a sign of the times and the corruption of the mores of society. We also have writings from the church father Clement of Alexandria talking about the Eleusinian mysteries, which, they were connected to the myth of Persephone and Eurydice. And that was their main focus, but Dionysius had a huge role in that rites too. The Eleusinian mysteries, where we get the word Hierophant from, by the way. That's where the word in the tarot deck comes from. That was the priest of the Eleusinian mysteries. The Eleusinian mysteries, would often devolve into group sexual activity as well, according to Clement of Alexandria. So, I'm just putting that out there. I'll also point out, beyond just Dionysus, Hecate in Deist mythology. If you're not aware, Hecate, or Hecate if you prefer a more Greek pronunciation, she's one of the patron goddesses of the Temple of Ascending Flame. And she's the Greek god of witchcraft in the night. In Greek mythology, her priestess, who kind of became a deified heroine, is Medea. She was the lover of Jason, Jason and the Argonauts. And Medea, she was a witch. She practiced magic and potion brewing. There's a story that she allegedly descended into the underworld, Medea, to obtain this magical flower which bloomed from the blood of Prometheus. This creates a potion which grants invulnerability. If you don't know who Prometheus is, Prometheus was a titan who, in traditional Greek mythology, in a more kind of normal, basic, traditional Greco-mythological scheme, he's the one who's responsible for creating man. This differs from the Orphics, who had a modified mythology. The According to basic Greek mythology, Prometheus stole the divine fire from the gods, and he formed man out of clay and gave this divine spark into man, and elevated man into who he is today. He taught man the basics of civilization. Zeus thought this was a violation of the divine law, and he damned Prometheus to Tartarus, or hell, and he was chained to a rock. Nailed to a rock. Excuse me, not chained. Nailed to a rock. Forced to have an eagle pluck out his liver for eternity. Tartarus is the lowest region of hell, or the underworld in Greek mythology. The lowest region of Hades. Hell's kind of a later Christian imposition in terms of translation, but anyways. One can't help but notice all these ideas sounding kind of familiar. At this point, some alarm bells should have gone on in their head. It's like kind of interesting. So we have this story of Dionysus, who is the son of the king of the gods, is born of a human priestess, virgin priestess, and he's half man and half god. He's this god affiliated with wine and wine miracles, and his key ritual ceremony is the drinking of divine wine to connect to the gods, to divinity itself. Dionysus is kind of a transgressive figure, right? He transgresses social norms in a way that would cause outrage at the time. You have the story of Prometheus being nailed to a rock and his liver or his side pierced, and from that comes blood, right? And this blood has supernatural life-giving properties to it. This should all sound very familiar to those who have any basic familiarity with Christian mythology. With Jesus, who is the son of God, the son of Yahweh, he's fully God and fully man, born of the Virgin Mary. He's this kind of antinomian figure who is transgressive. He upsets the established religious order. He's nailed to a wood. He's pierced at the side, and blood comes from his side, which gives divinity, which gives immortal life, which is synonymous with God himself. So, interesting connections. And that leads to the necessary follow-up question of how much of this pre-existing Greco-Roman mythology influenced Christian mythology? One could argue, and it's a really valid argument, that a lot of Christian mythology was really borrowing from previous existing ideas and blending it with Jewish mythology. Certainly there are some Jewish mythological elements to the Last Supper. For example, Passover, which happens at the same time. If you go to Eastern Orthodox countries, Easter is called Pascha, or the Passover. Passover is this Jewish festival celebrating, Exodus and Moses. It's this festival of eating bread and drinking wine, and there's this fifth cup called Elijah's cup, and Jews aren't supposed to drink that because it symbolizes the coming Messiah. So you can kind of see where the idea of the Eucharist comes from, just from a Jewish mythological perspective. Now we can drink the wine because Jesus has come, the Messiah has come. But things were probably not that simple, because we do know that the Greeks and Romans were blending foreign mythologies with their own. We know they were doing this with the Persian mythology. They were blending Greco-Roman mythological ideas with Zoroastrianism, which the cult of Mithraism, as we know it, that the Romans practiced, very likely didn't have a direct one-to-one correspondence of how the Persians were actually practicing Zoroastrianism. Egyptian mythology, the cult of Isis and Serapis and Harpocrates, these gods were blended with Greek gods, and things were kind of misconstrued and transformed from what they originally were in Egyptian mythology. So we have these cults and these Greco-Romans blending these mythological tropes. It's probably not that far of a stretch to say they were doing this with the Jewish mythology too. They were taking their pre-existing Greco-Roman ideas and blending it with Jewish mythology. Even if that wasn't true, and there's a good argument to say maybe it wasn't, maybe it was all spontaneous and original, it's very easy to see that when Christianity became a politically imposed religion that you had to believe and follow to become part of the state, how these old cultural patterns and behaviors might have molded and influenced Christianity. I am a strong pattern in unconscious belief influencing the way we operate as a society. What happens is there's an idea, people follow that idea, they do things incorporating that idea, then they forget the idea, but they keep teaching their kids how to do that idea, and they keep teaching those kids, and you're doing these patterns of cultural behavior that you don't even know why you're doing it, right? And I think religion and mythology influence our culture just like our cultural patterns influence mythology and religion. At some level, religion and mythology is a reflection of one's own culture. But one's own culture also influences religion and mythology. And religion and mythology influences that culture. So it's pretty easy to see how, say you're a Greco-Roman pagan and you have these ideas, and Christianity comes along and becomes the state religion, and you start practicing it, and it replaces the pre-existing structure. You start having these ideas that are floating around of drinking divine wine, which is the divinity itself, the idea of a man nailed to something, and you pierce a side and you can drink its blood. The idea of this blood and bodily fluids creating these supernatural flowers. This idea of Jesus being God and man at the same time. These ideas float around, and they just feel right because you're immersed in a culture where that's the norm and that's what's understood. So I think that even if Christianity had no direct influence from Greco-Roman mythology, which I don't think, I just think that's flagrantly not true, it's very easy to see how Greco-Roman culture molded and shaped Christianity as we know it today. To be even more provocative, however, I'm going to ask an even daring question. How much of this Dionysian ritual influenced the idea of the Witches' Sabbath or the Satanic Black Mass? The Witches' Sabbath is this frenzy of madness, licentiousness, orgies, right? So you do it in the woods with these goats and these satyrs and these naked women, right? With the devil and these demons, and you partake of the divinity of the gods, right? The demons have rebelled against Yahweh and angels, and they claim to be gods in their own rights, and they say you too can become a god, and you participate in that divinity, right? I want to point out that the divine animal of Dionysus was the bull. It's a symbol of fertility and agriculture. And sometimes Dionysus was depicted with bull horns in the bottom left picture. You can see the two horns coming out of his head. And everyone who's seen any image of Satan in pop culture can look at that image and see like, hey, that looks like Satan, right? Satan has those two horns. Dionysus himself had a retinue of crazed women and satyrs who participated in these orgies with him, these feasts of frenzy and madness. You can see how that influences the idea of the Witches' Sabbath, of this communal fest of satyrs and goats and women, and madness, and insanity, and licentiousness, and sexuality, right? Plays a role in that. So I ask the question again, how much did this Dionysian ritual influence the Satanic Black Mass and the Satanic Witches' Sabbath? It's a provocative question. So that's Greco-Roman ideas. Let's move on to the medieval period, or Lucifer's Holy Grail. So I think many of us are familiar with the legend of the Holy Grail. As I said, if I didn't say this earlier, it is the cup that Jesus drinks from during the Last Supper, the chalice that Jesus himself personally used. Subject to a lot of folklore in Europe. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusades about finding the Holy Grail. There's a lot of Arthurian stories of the Knights of the Round Table trying to find the Holy Grail. But there's a lot of unknown folkloric elements that have been kind of lost to time, unfortunately. We live in an era where people are trying to salvage the literal belief in Christianity, and the way they're doing that is by subtraction. They're trying to get rid of all the outlandish, mythological, and supernatural elements to Christianity to make it pragmatic and believable, even if it's not what the Christians of old believed in. Christians of the medieval period who were educated on this folklore believed in things like this. But today, they don't, because they see it as an invention and superstitious and folklorish, right? They try to make it more palatable that Christianity literally happened by getting rid of some of the more outlandish elements of it. So it's a shame we've lost a lot of these folkloric stories. But in one medieval legend, the Holy Grail was actually originally Lucifer's crown. Lucifer had an emerald crown in heaven, and he rebelled against God with his angels. And when he fell to earth, this crown fell to earth. Now, through some circumstances, this crown eventually became fashioned into the Grail that Jesus used. And in a lot of ways, he used it during the Last Supper to symbolize his victory over the devil, because he has possession and dominion over the devil's crown, right? But that didn't stop people from treating the Holy Grail as a divine artifact. Remember, it's a supernatural crown that the devil himself used. You know, the devil, he can give you what you want for the right bargain, right? He can make a deal with you at the crossroads. He's supernatural. He's the Lord of this earth, the spirit of the air. He has supernatural powers that are beyond what you could imagine, right? So, because it's his crown, and it's a supernatural artifact that Jesus used was the devil's own crown, there became a lot of mythology that formulated around the Holy Grail's powers and abilities. This Emerald Grail. An analogous and often conflated concept is found in the Philosopher's Stone, which is this alchemical stone that has these supernatural magical properties. There is this chivalric romance from Germany called Parzival, where the two ideas are very clearly conflated, the idea of the Holy Grail and the magical stone or the Philosopher's Stone. In Parzival, this grail, this magical stone, has the ability to create stuff out of nothing, to bring the dead back to life, to give immortal life to those who find it. Because of this legend, actually, absinthe as a drink, this hard liquor, this green emerald-looking liquor with wormwood in it, became kind of like the devil's drink. It was associated with alchemy, emerald. You can see in the bottom right corner of an absinthe advertisement. But also, even in the Nazi period of Germany, there were people who were interested in finding Lucifer's crown. There's one by the name of Otto Rahn who traveled around Europe during the Nazi period of Germany, trying to find the Holy Grail, Lucifer's emerald crown. He writes these journeys and ideas down in his diary. And these travels across Europe trying to find the Holy Grail is actually what led to the inspiration of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So if you didn't know that, a Nazi looking for Lucifer's crown is what led to the inspiration of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So that's kind of the medieval folklore. But now let's talk about a more modern, kind of occultic tradition in more recent history. The Temple of Set and its connection to the Holy Grail. I think the Temple of Set's important because it's important and how it influenced and helped form the Draconian tradition. For example, the tunnels of Set play a role in the Draconian tradition, and that has its origins in the Temple of Set. So, also in the Draconian tradition, Set is sometimes identified with Satan. So, that has some connection to the Temple of Set's belief that Set is Satan and is the one true God. So what is the Temple of Set? So there was this organization called the Church of Satan, founded by a man by the name of Anton LaVey. According to Kino, who's a high-ranking member of the organization, they all took the religion pretty seriously, like they believed it was a real esoteric and spiritual path with the devil. But they had to put on a public face of atheism and just role-play and things like that, given the social context in which the Church of Satan emerged. Remember, we're talking about the 1970s in America. The Rolling Stones song Sympathy for the Devil caused mass cultural riots because it was believed to be corrupted views. So they had to be very careful. But one day, Anton LaVey came out and said, yes, this is all roleplay, this is all atheistic, we don't believe in the devil as an entity, we don't believe in anything supernatural, we don't believe in magic, it's not real. Aquino disagreed with that interpretation. He left to form the Temple of Set. And what's interesting, and I'll point this out, is that Anton LaVey's daughter, Zena LaVey, actually joined the Temple of Set. She agreed with Aquino that this was a serious religious tradition that they're following, and that there is a real spiritual element to their practice. Her and her husband, Nicholas Schreck. However, these days those two don't really identify as left-hand practicing occultists. They became Tibetan Buddhists. So what does the Temple of Set believe in? The Temple of Set identifies the Christian Satan with the Egyptian adversarial deity Set, who is the god of disease, pestilence, plagues, foreign invasions, droughts. He's the Egyptian god of adversity. The Temple of Set believes that this is the same deity as Satan, and Satan is really ultimately Set, and that Set is the one true deity who brought what is called the black flame to man. This is kind of this Promethean flame that elevated human consciousness from an animalistic one to an inquisitive, rational, spiritually connected one. For Setians, the black flame is essentially the divine spark of man. It's that inner divinity that we can connect to, and you work with that inner divinity, that inner black flame, to achieve apotheosis, to achieve godhood. The Grail also has a profound symbol of this journey as well. The Grail is used in the Temple of Set, and as well as the Church of Satan. It was called the Chalice of Ecstasy. According to Michael Kino himself, it symbolizes absolute truth, and it's never to be found by the profane, only those who seek the truth. So what are the conclusions to all this? There's a lot of information. What do we conclude from this? Well, I think you've got to find that out yourself. It would be really nice if we could neatly tie these ideas together. And I did my own a little bit of analysis for you and for your benefit when it came to Greco-Roman mythology and how that relates to Christianity. But I think you have to be the one to find these answers yourself. What does this all mean? What is this information? How do these things neatly connect with each other? I think the Luciferian path, the Draconian tradition, the Temple of Ascending Flame, it's a path of self-reliance. It's a path of autonomy. It's about finding the answers yourself. I've given you all this objective information, and I think you should do some reflection on it and come to your own conclusions. I think through your own experience of wrestling with these ideas and concepts, you'll come to answers better than I can explain to you. You need to experience truth and the answers itself, rather than have me spoon-feed it to you. So let's get into the more analytical, esoteric part of this presentation. I'm talking about this from a Draconian perspective, from the Temple of Ascending Flame perspective. It's my own interpretation of what I think the Grail means in this path. I'm going to be doing what is called a Pythagorean analysis. So I invoke Pythagoras because he's responsible for a type of pattern-based thinking that I'm going to apply today. We don't have any direct works from Pythagoras. Pythagoras, if you don't know, he was a Greek mathematician, philosopher, mystery cultist. He started his own religion. We don't have any of his direct writings, but a lot of his ideas were repeated and copied and pasted in Neoplatonic and Platonic works, like the Chaldean oracles, the Apophasis of Megaliae, and even the Justinian heretics, as quoted by Saint Hippolytus of Rome. These are just a few examples. His ideas are found everywhere. So they were all extracted by subsequent authors into occultic and esoteric books like the Pythagorean Triangle by George Oliver and the Secret Teaching of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. The basic idea of Pythagorean thinking is the idea that the mundane patterns we experience in our life and in our mythology, they speak to a divine pattern, that there's a connection between what we experience in religious mythology in terms of the patterns we find, as well as what we experience in our mundane day-to-day life, and they point in the same direction of the divine. I'll give you an example, right? So, creating new life, right? A woman typically appears in a man's life, and he becomes attracted to her. He tries to impress her, he asks her out, he takes her out on dates, and then they eventually, that culminates in the sexual act, which leads to the creation of children eventually. Likewise, a person will be doing their everyday thing in life, and they'll come across something that's objective in their life, that's empirical, and it moves them, it moves their hearts. They feel passionate about it. And they use their mind to create new art, new literature, new music with these ideas. And there's a connection between the creation of new life and the creation of new ideas that speaks to a divine pattern of the act of creation. They speak to a deeper spirituality of the interaction between the objective and the subjective, the eros, the passion, and logos, the rationality, the feminine and the masculine, the intermingling of the two to create new things. So that kind of extrapolation of looking at the divine from the mundane and the mythological is the kind of pattern thinking we're going to do with the Holy Grail. So what is the Grail? At its most root level, the Grail is a cup of nourishing liquid, water or wine. It literally provides life and nourishment. We need water and drinks to live and survive as people, to grow. From the time we're a baby and we're drinking milk from our mother, all the way up to we're an adult, we need like nourishing liquid to transform and evolve and survive. And this water plays a role in our biological transformation as we continue to grow and develop as people. We need it to grow and survive and live. In a related sense, alcohol has a sense of giving life in a more joyful sense, in a more cheerful sense, in celebratory occasions like marriage, for example. Wine has a connection of giving new life to us that breaches away from the mundane and the old, right? It's used often in marriage with the creation of new life. You can find a further connection with childbirth, right? When an egg is fertilized and a fetus is formed, there is life that is sustained by the womb. It nourishes and evolves the fetus into a baby and then into a fully developed human being. And that's the womb is a dark, moist, wet, cold place that fundamentally transforms and feeds the infant. In various mythologies, the waters are associated with the primal waters, the void, darkness before light and order comes in and creates things. This happens in the Bible. This happens in Greco-Roman mythology. And in a sense, you could kind of view the universe as a womb in that way, in that we have to interact with this void, these primal waters to continually transform and evolve into who we're meant to be in our day-to-day life. With that being said, I do want to point out that in Western occultism, water and earth are genuinely associated with the feminine, and fire and air are associated with the masculine. This is true also with the spiritual entities and the gods Samael and Lilith. Samael is the Jewish name for Satan, and is the angel of death, the devil. He's associated with fire and air in my personal experience, while Lilith tends to be associated with water and earth. Now, it isn't that reductive, okay? It's just like, but those are the elements that tend to be prioritized in terms of their spiritual meaning. If you read the Zohar actually suggests this. The Zohar is a Jewish Kabbalistic text where a lot of ideas of Kabbalah come from, and in it, the Zohar says Samael is the soul while Lilith is the body. They're two parts of the same devil, the same entity. They're always attached to each other. Lilith is the serpent, and Samael is the spirit by which the acts are wrought. Like Samael is the spirit that moves the serpent to act, and Lilith is the serpent herself. Fire and air are more spiritual elements. They're more ethereal. They're not really physical. Whereas earth and water are material elements, like the serpent. Lilith has further association with water and earth in her own mythology, right? In Jewish folklore, when Lilith was exiled from the Garden of Eden, she resided in a cave by the Red Sea, and that connects her to water and earth. The cave being a symbol of the earth, and the Red Sea being a symbol of water. The cave itself is like a moist, wet place. It's like the womb, right? A little bit of a detour from my own esoteric analysis of the Grail, because everything before that is connected to my analysis of the Grail. This is actually why the Baphomet is the symbol it is, right? So Rashi, a medieval Jewish rabbi, explained that this is where the word Leviathan comes from. Leviathan kind of gives up the idea of unification of like two entities working together to be one. There's an idea of hermaphroditism to it. And that Satan is ultimately the union of Samael, the masculine air spirit, with Lilith, the serpent. For this reason, the sigil of Baphomet implies the union of Samael and Lilith and is the sigil of the devil. If you actually look at the bottom left sigil of Baphomet, you'll see in Hebrew the word Leviathan in Hebrew circling the sigil, and you'll see Samael at the top, Lilith at the bottom. You'll see the 5-point pentagram. You can interpret that as the 5 elements, but it's inverted. Instead of the upright elements, it's the downward elements. and it is the sigil of the hermaphroditic union of Samael and Lilith. It is the unified male and female devil, the adversary. So back to the Grail. So looking at what we know about elements and the spirits, the Grail is ultimately a feminine symbol, right? It is a symbol of something that's holding liquid. You can see the divine pattern of the womb holding creation and the divine cosmos holding creation. The womb, the chalice, the cup holds the nourishing liquid for our transformation. It's a feminine symbol. It's water. It's liquid. It's connected to the element of water, as we know in the Western occultic tradition, and it's connected to Lilith at some level, where she is the left-hand path spirit of water and earth. It represents necessary transformation and nourishment that spiritual reality provides. It's necessary for our own evolution. These spiritual realities provide nourishment, development, transformation in a spiritual sense, in a way analogous to mundane water transforms herself in a biological sense, in a mundane way that the womb of a woman nourishes new life, in the way that the cosmos nourishes us. The chalice fundamentally nourishes us and transforms us, and is a symbol of what we're going to, what we're transforming into. In a more draconian sense, you could also say that the embrace of the chalice is the soul's full embrace of the void. It's the full embrace of the feminine primal waters. You embrace the spiritual womb of Lilith herself and become born again. In a marital kind of understanding of this, because the chalice and wine and everything has a kind of marital connotation to it, it represents kind of the inner merging of male and female parts within. It's the inner spiritual marriage. That's what the chalice is. It's the drinking of the wine cup at that own spiritual union of Samael and Lilith, the union of the dark masculine and the dark feminine to become a god. It's the working of your own inner divinity and working with that inner divinity with the forces of darkness to transform yourself into that of the gods. Now, some might play devil's advocate and claim, like, well, the divine spark isn't necessarily connected to the Holy Grail. The divine spark is a more masculine element, right? But I don't think the two necessarily contradict each other. I think there is a divine relationship between the Grail and the divine spark is the source of the divinity. I think you need the masculine and the feminine working in tandem to lead to that transformation. So through the embrace of this Grail, through the embrace of Lilith's womb and her transformation, we can achieve full apotheosis and become a god ourselves. I have citations to every single claim I've made here. You can look at them yourself. Thank you for this presentation. I hope to see you again soon.